from Abuja.
It's all about the human struggle to raise a level of living. That's what it's all about. I'm Magnus Packle, and this is Magnus Packle GVA. I appreciate your being a part of our show. In view today, the economic violence of impunity. We talk to two experts on leadership and civil society matters. Can Africa end impunity and its economic consequences? But before that, in our quick view, we check to see if the Nigerian economy is really getting dollarized. That's coming right up. If the Nigerian economy is being dollarized, then it means that merchants in Nigeria now prefer to be paid in dollars or other hard currency than in naira. What we have in Nigeria today is not dollarization, but the fear of dollarization. And even this is mostly among some policymakers. Certainly, many developing countries have limited and often unofficial forms of dollarization, implying that a significant proportion of their residents hold dollars or other hard currency and hard currency denominated deposits at domestic banks. In high inflation countries, dollars or some other hard currency may be in widespread use in daily transactions alongside the local currency. This typically happens because residents are afraid of economic instability and high inflation, and therefore would want to diversify and protect their assets from the risk of devaluation of their own currency. Right now, the Nigerian economy is quite stable, and there are no signs of oncoming hyperinflation. So there should be no immediate fear of Nigerians going for currency substitution. However, if there is something that spooks Nigerians, then they may go for some asset substitution and look for hard currency, for example, the dollar, to use as cover. I don't think there should be much fear of this scenario developing either. However, some things for policymakers to keep an eye on include a 2015 that careens out of hand, a widespread increased production of shale oil, increased domestic theft of crude oil, rigidity in OPEC quota for Nigeria, and unbalanced thirst for foreign goods and services. No country, not even Nigeria, can beat its citizens into submission from using the dollar domestically if the forces that promote currency substitution and asset substitution become intense. Indeed, the real problem at that time will not be dollarization, but instead the perils of inflation and uncertainty that caused the dollarization in the first place. If anything, at that point, dollarization is even a needed solution. This experience has been borne out among South American countries, and now very much right here in Africa, in Zimbabwe. If somehow we fear dollarization, then we should improve our skill sets and infrastructural base, as I hope we are doing, in order to produce more goods and services in the country. This will cause people, foreigners and Nigerians, to increase their demand for the naira so they can buy these goods. Now, if some people are smuggling dollars into the country, there must be reason for it, and we need to know these people. They may have useful information for our policymakers. Still in view, the economic violence of impunity. But before that, in our hidden economics, looking for female personal drivers? Stay with us. It is well proven that women can do just about anything that men can do, and quite often more glamorously. Women are in the armed forces around the world. They play soccer, tennis, and every kind of sport with incredible entertainment value. Yes, of course, in the workplace, they are doctors, engineers, lawyers, and economists of great repute, just to mention a few professions. And as comedians, politicians, and musicians, they are electric. All these things they can do, but why can't they be hired as personal drivers, even by female employers? Guess the reason. Cost. That's the reason. Compared to male personal drivers, female personal drivers come at much higher cost to themselves and to their bosses. Your male driver can show up for work and at the shortest notice, just about any time you want him. Sometimes if it's too early in the morning, he will jump right out of bed and shoot straight to work, perhaps without even brushing his teeth, let alone taking a bath. Now, hardly any woman will be brave enough to appear for her highly placed boss without taking a bath or brushing her teeth. In fact, she would need time for an appropriate hairstyle for any given day, and then find matching clothes and makeup to boot. This is expensive in time and money required, and this cost will have to be passed on to the employer. In addition, there are other psychic costs faced by the female driver. If she is single and needing to marry, being seen all the time and alone in a car with a male boss may discourage potential suitors. And then, of course, many husbands may not be greatly excited about having their wives driving a man late into the night all the time. You may ask, how about the many lady bus drivers out there? These are not personal drivers. They are around many people at any given time, and then they typically have set work schedules. So in addition to the monetary costs and other opportunity costs, the psychic costs identified may also be passed on to the employer. And then some employers somehow believe that ladies are not good drivers and would want to pay an unacceptably low wage to a female driver. What it all means is that the market for female personal drivers still needs more understanding for fair equilibrium wages to be determined. All things considered, potential female drivers typically look for a job in an occupation or profession where employers are willing and are able to pay a fair wage. Our hidden economics for you. Today we look at an issue that has become very topical throughout Africa: impunity. But specifically, we look at the economic violence of impunity. To do this, we have with us two dynamic and well-experienced gentlemen who have covered, followed, and researched trends in Africa. Linus Okorie is the managing consultant, New Vision Consults. He's an attitude and leadership consultant. Dr. Otiv Ibuzo is the executive director of the African Center for Leadership, Strategy, and Development. He is the former international head of campaigns of Action Aid International and country director for Action Aid Nigeria. Please join me with Mr. Okorie and Dr. Ibuzo. Well, gentlemen, I wanted to ask this question. Well, gentlemen, I wanted to ask this question. I'm thinking, when we look at impunity, is it possible that some of the underdevelopment that we see in Africa today, that we see in Nigeria today, that some of that can be traceable to impunity? And impunity in this case can include something like incompetence, where you do something you're not supposed to, or you're not doing a good job. You do something wrong and nothing happens to you.
Well, I think that we can trace part of the challenges we have in terms of development to impunity, because if you look at it very well, you will see that one of the greatest challenges is leadership failure. And when this leadership failure happens and people are not rewarded for how you should reward people who fail in leadership, then you can say it's impunity, because we've seen situations where people perform poorly in leadership positions and they are returned back to office, either actually voted or rigged back into office. So there are a lot of people in Africa whose conduct is not showing, it's not commensurate with the kind of support they have. We've seen cases, for instance, if you look at Zimbabwe, the impunity of the leadership there has caused a lot of economic problem to the people. There was a time you have to carry loads of money to buy bread, yet election after election, by one way or the other, Robert Mugabe comes back to power. So I think we can say with some high degree of precision that part of the challenges in Africa is impunity. And that has also contributed to the underdevelopment that we have. Because it doesn't mean that there are no competent people, or there are no people who are able to provide the kind of leadership that will bring about development in Africa. Yes. But the challenge is that the leadership selection process, has not been able to deal with impunity, has not been able to deal with incompetence, has not been able to throw out the best that we have in the system. So we can say, to some extent, that impunity has contributed to underdevelopment.
We can say that.
Yes.
Thank you, Doctor. Mr. Curry, I'm talking not just about malfeasance, poor public conduct, but as I said, also about incompetence, also about the guy in the street, the taxi driver that cuts in front of somebody. That's bad driving. The lecturer that gets away with whatever he gets away with. All these general things. But when you add them all together, in my view, they impact overall economic performance. And they create what I call it's an economic violence. If we undermine economic growth and development, and therefore we don't apply our resources optimally in a way that assures that we're raising the level of living, so we suffer from increased infant mortality, from poor maternal health, from accidents due to bad roads, from all these tragedies, if we may call them that I'm thinking that that's where the so-called economic violence of impunity comes in. Do you support that? Do you see that as being true, that in fact poor economic development and the ramifications thereof are attributable to impunity?
Absolutely. I mean, like my friend said, the first thing we have to connect with this is it's all about leadership brings progress within systems and organizations. And across Africa, we've observed over time that the level of impunity, which is just one of the challenges of deficits of quality leadership, that's what it brings. Because one of the most powerful things that can drive progress within system is the power of personal examples. And that's what, leadership is about. So if you find a couple of leaders heading institutions and organizations who come in and set the standards and say, you know what, according to Peter Drucker's definition of leadership, and says leadership is just about doing the right things. And you have individuals who are drivers of nations who say, you know what, we must do the right things within our country. Hold me responsible if things are not done right. If I fail, punish me for doing wrong. What happens normally is that everyone sits up within such a system because their standards are very high. The man comes and sets the standards and says the rule of law must be managed appropriately. And what happens is that everybody begins to toe according to the line the leader is doing. That's what normally happens because it is driven by a big vision. But when there is failure of leadership in that regard, so people begin to get very insecure. Leaders get very insecure because they are doing so many wrong things, as the case may be, and they cover up the wrong things that they do. And they have assistants all over the place who know that these people are doing the wrong things. And so it goes down
Do they actually know that they're doing the wrong thing?
Absolutely, they know.
A poor leader actually knows that, I'm a poor leader?
Well, I think there are different, ways you can look at it.
Yes.
There are some people who, what I call promotion into incompetence.
Promotion into incompetence.
Yes, you promote them to position that they are not prepared for.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And so...
That the society does that, not they themselves promoting themselves
the society,
into incompetence.
the system,
Yes.
the leadership selection process.
Okay.
There are some people who, know that they are not performing. And like Linus mentioned, they have to do things to cover up their inefficiencies. They are insecure leaders. They must make sure that those who are around them are not leaders but followers. Those who, especially in our place like in Nigeria, where sycophancy has been promoted into an act. So you surround yourself with sycophants, with people who will carry your handbag, and people who will run after you, people who will praise you, people who will not raise critical inquiries, critical issues that can lead to development. So there are those kind of people who are in positions, they know they are incompetent, and they do everything to protect themselves. There are also others who don't know. And in fact, those are the most tragic ones.
They don't know.
They don't know that they are poor leaders, but they pose as leaders. Yeah. But I think there is a concept you raise, which I think is very important, the concept of economic violence. Yeah. And most economic violence are structural. The way the system is organized, the way policies are made, the way things are done, ensure that some people remain perpetually poor. They are hardworking. They want to put effort in order to make a good standard of living, but the system is structured to make it impossible for them to perform.
Is it possible that the whole issue of impunity and therefore the economic consequences of it are again traceable to our selection process, our way by which we select our leaders?
Absolutely.
And if that is the case, what can we do about it?
Yeah. One of the things that I have advocated for many years, basically is that, nobody ever, there's no person who is being elected or appointed into position that tells you one day that he is tired, that please come and take. It's a very difficult process. Yeah. So what I've always advocated is that the people of each of the African countries must take responsibility of their countries in their own hands. Because what has happened over time is that the people who have occupied public positions have actually thrown it into the atmosphere, a myth that says that it is impossible for men and women of honor to be elected properly in the political space. They have also said that politics is a very dirty game. That anybody who is good, quality, shouldn't even think about the political space. And so most very, very good people begin to claim the self-righteousness style and say, no, I don't want to belong in the political space.
Impunity is usually the companion of a high rate of corruption, poor respect for the rule of law, voiceless civil society, and a weak judiciary. Indeed, recently, former President of Ghana, Jerry Rawlings, while addressing a gathering of statesmen, parliamentarians, civil society groups, the academia, development partners, and other participants on the challenges and opportunities of emerging democracies in Africa, criticized what he described as the culture of impunity that has encouraged the spread of corruption in Africa. President Jerry Rawlings lamented a situation where petty thieves are slammed with long jail terms, while the big thieves in public and private sectors are not ever prosecuted. Clearly, impunity is not just an African problem. It apparently, until recently, continued to happen in China, as paradoxically strong economic growth prevailed alongside widespread corruption. Well, it appears strong steps are now being taken. Consider the dismissal of Jian Zemin, the minister overseeing China's powerful state-owned enterprises, over, quote, serious violations of discipline. Well, this is party speak for corruption. So President Xi Jinping is at least doing something about impunity. Mr. Xi vows to fight corrupt officials, large and small, tigers and flies, as he puts it. Certainly, the range of what is impunity can cover a long stretch. It includes the unpunished activities of untouchable leaders committing crimes against humanity. It includes law enforcement officers wantonly and without fear or reservation using live ammunition on protesters, manhandling motorists in traffic, assaulting journalists, and sometimes killing them. It also includes lecturers in institutions of learning who sexually harass their own students. It doesn't stop there. It includes drivers who break every traffic rule because they can and know they will never be stopped or charged with any violation. Now, a big one. Is the ICC, the International Criminal Court, fighting impunity in Africa or just picking on African leaders? You be the judge. Even so, I personally do think that outside of exceptional situations, foreign bodies should wait for a leader to leave office and then go after them. If we need to, let us shame the guilty leader, not the country. We speak of the violence of impunity because impunity means that reparations and compensation are not made when they should have been made. People suffer unmitigated harm, and these have costs. Also, when it involves malfeasance, what they call public misconduct, especially in corruption, there is degradation in government services, which can weaken economic growth and development and cause harm on society in infant mortality, maternal deaths, road accidents, robberies, and other problems. Now, when will this end in Africa? We can end it with credible legal infrastructure in place. We can also add to this mass campaign on the importance of condemning and challenging impunity. We can do this. We can end impunity. I'm Magnus Packel, and that's my view.